Who wants to be a millionaire? Pretty much everyone, right? I mean, that's why I started this YouTube channel. And it turns out that this was a very good idea, because you see, I've become a millionaire 9 times over during the making of just this one video. That's because this video is about 9 different banknotes, each worth 1 million somethings. It sort of depends. I've got 1,000,000 marks, 1,000,000 dinars, 1,000,000 pesos, and even one which is, yes, a $1 million bill. Hi, I'm Fredo Rockwell, and welcome to another edition of Strange Money. And if you like the sound of this video so far, please be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the bell so you get alerted about new videos as they're posted. My channel recently hit 300 subscribers, which is fab, and I'd love for you to be one of my first 400 subs. So go on then, it's free. Okay, before we look at these banknotes, I should explain that no country ever prints a 1 million denomination note because things are good. These notes have mostly been printed during an economic crisis, or sometimes a political crisis. Often the 1 million is the highest denomination a country ever prints, but just as often it is just an alarm bell that things have gone really badly and a hyperinflationary catastrophe is looming over the horizon. Gosh, that was cheerful. Okay, let's get started with this 1 million marks banknote from Germany's Weimar Republic. As most people who have ever sat through a history class probably know, following World War I, the Allied powers forced Germany to pay war reparations. Heavily in debt and ravaged by war, by 1923, paying these reparations had led to the spectacular collapse of the German currency. This 1 million mark note, issued on the 20th of February of that year, is, as far as I can tell, the first of several designs of 1 million mark notes issued that year. The financial system pretty much collapsed into a confusing mess about this time, so lots of different versions got printed. Some were even issued by desperate local governments. Inflation became such a problem that within 9 months, in November 1923, the German government issued its first 1 trillion mark note, and by February 1924, there was a 100 trillion mark banknote. Eventually, the economic crisis came to an end, and a new mark was introduced at the rate of 1 trillion to 1, and, thankfully, hyperinflation did not return. But back to this original 1 million mark note, which is, as of the making of this video, 98 years old. Its shape seems a bit odd to the modern eye. It really wouldn't fit into any wallet I've ever had, and the back of the note is completely blank. Like the best banknotes of this era, though, the printing is incredibly intricate, and I especially like the gradual color change from red to green and back to red. One feature I really like is the 10 tiny signatures from various Reichsbank directors, plus the words "eine Million" worked into the background of the note so subtly I didn't even notice this until I got out my magnifying glass. There is no watermark per se, but there is a hidden pattern in the paper, which shows up in the light. Most inflationary German banknotes produced after this one tended to have much more basic designs and were made with much lower production values. So to me, I suspect when they made this banknote, they didn't yet realize how bad things were going to get, and they were still trying to produce quality designs. Later, of course, Germany became one of the best countries in the world for keeping inflation low, and its post-war currency, the Deutsche Mark, was considered one of the most stable in the world before it gave way to the euro in 1999. A more severe, but less well-known case of hyperinflation hit Hungary just after World War II. This, my friends, is Hungary's 1 million pengo note from November 1945. I gotta say, pengo is one of my favorite names for a currency of all time, especially as it reminds me of the Swiss children's TV character Pengu. Inflation got so bad in Hungary that year that shops doubled their prices on average every 15 hours. In other words, whatever your money bought in the morning, it could only buy half as much by the time you went to bed. With such crazy inflation, it's hardly surprising that by July 1946, the Hungarian government set the world's record for the highest denomination banknote ever issued, the 100 quintillion pengo note. But wind the clock back to November 1945 for a moment, before inflation reached such absurd heights, when the government issued this 1 million pengo note. I think this one is a cracker. Not so much because of the front, which features the 19th century Hungarian politician Lajos Kossuth. This side is not bad, I guess, although it's a bit formal. But the reverse, wow. This engraving here is a reproduction of a painting entitled Fisherman's Hut on Lake Balaton by the 19th century Hungarian landscape painter Geza Mezsoli. The original painting is fine, I guess, but it looks amazing here, printed in these really rich shades of blue. I really like this one. One more thing about the reverse side here, you can see 1 million pengo written in 6 different languages, including Russian, Serbo-Croatian, and German, a great reflection of Hungary's linguistic diversity at the time, which I'm pretty sure no longer exists. In August 1946, the pengo was replaced with the forint at a rate of 400 octillion to 1. Did you even know that octillion was a word? That revaluation was the equivalent of removing a whopping 29 zeros, what I suspect may have been the biggest of all time, and the forint remains Hungary's currency today. Next, we're off to South America, specifically early 1980s Argentina. Rampant inflation has long been a massive problem in Argentina and continues to be a problem today. In fact, I did an entire video about Argentina's hyperinflationary debacle in the late 1980s, but this note from 1981 came before that crisis and was the first 1 million peso note Argentina ever issued. The portrait on the obverse is of José de San Martin, who, like Simón Bolívar, helped liberate several South American countries in the early 1800s. One of these countries, Argentina, has considered San Martin a national hero ever since. Importantly, he was a general who led an army. At the time this banknote was produced, Argentina was ruled by a military dictatorship, so being a general, he was exactly the sort of national hero they were keen to promote. General San Martin appeared on dozens of different banknotes during that era. I can't say, honestly, that I find this banknote overly exciting. I do dig the groovy fonts used for the 1 million number on each side. The reverse features an engraving of Argentina's Independence Day, the 25th of May, 1810. It looks like it was a pretty subdued affair, if I'm honest. This incarnation of the Argentine peso, which was known as the peso ley, or legal peso, was replaced in 1983 by the new peso argentino, or Argentine peso, at a rate of 10,000 to 1. The Argentine peso was also subject to even worse inflation, and things got so bad that in 1985 it was replaced by a completely new currency, the Austral. And the Austral was in fact the biggest economic disaster of all. That's what my video is about. Check it out. Staying with the 1980s for a moment, we next visit Yugoslavia, which still existed at the time, was still communist, and was grappling with rising ethnic tensions. Ultimately, this led to Yugoslavia breaking apart into 6 new countries, 7 if you count Kosovo, and one of the most violent, horrific civil wars of the 20th century. But 2 years before it began to fall apart, in 1989, Yugoslavia issued this, its first 1 million dinar note. This was at the start of a prolonged period of hyperinflation, which lasted for over 5 years. Some say this was the longest-lasting hyperinflationary event in history, and before things got better, Yugoslavia had issued a 500 billion dinar banknote. Crikey. But let's go back to this first 1 million dinar banknote from 1989. You've got to admit it's really plain. I think it's natural to assume that any 1 million denomination banknote would look really exciting with lots of colors and fantastic designs, but the reality is that these banknotes are usually issued by governments under strain who are short on time and money. This here is a prime example. You might be wondering who this friendly-looking woman on the obverse is. So am I. I'm pretty sure everyone in Yugoslavia was wondering who she was when this appeared. On all of the information I can find, she is named simply as a woman. Yugoslav banknotes at the time often featured random people on them, a young boy, a young girl, a minor, but some banknotes from the same series featured national heroes, like this note with Nikola Tesla. Tesla was not technically speaking a Yugoslav. He immigrated to America decades before the country of Yugoslavia was formed, but ethnically he was Serbian, so I guess that counts. Anyway, this 1 million dinar banknote does have a few interesting features, most notably the repetition of every term in the various languages of Yugoslavia, like Serbian, Croatian, Slovene, and Macedonian. The reverse has a splash of green, which is much needed, I think, plus a picture of wheat, maybe? There is a watermark of the woman, and there's not much else of interest. If you thought Yugoslavia's 1 million dinar note looked like a rush job, then check out this 1 million cordoba banknote from Nicaragua, which was issued in 1990. I know it says 1985 clearly on the obverse, but let me explain. This 1 million cordoba banknote is actually a 1,000 cordoba banknote which has been reissued, or, as we banknote collectors say, overprinted. If you look carefully in the middle, you can see the white 1,000 peeking through the gaps of the black 1 million numbers. The number 1,000 also appears on each corner, but with a spiderwebbish pattern stamped over it in a very unsuccessful attempt to hide the note's original value. The inflationary crisis which produced this 1 million Cordoba banknote took place during the rule of the communist Sandinista regime, which took power in Nicaragua in 1979. I don't know exactly what sparked the rampant inflation, but it probably came down to Nicaragua being small, poor, communist, and under attack by armed rebels being financed by a U.S. government-backed conspiracy. On the front of this banknote, we see Augusto Cesar Sedino, the namesake of the Sandinista movement. He was a Nicaraguan revolutionary who fought against the U.S. occupation of his country, which took place between 1912 and 1933. On the reverse side, we see more overprinting, plus a depiction of celebrations which took place on the 19th of July, 1979, when the Sandinistas took power from the previous regime. In my banknote collecting experience, a depiction of a historical event just a few years after it took place is pretty unusual. Another really curious feature of this banknote is the lack of watermark. There is a space where it looks like one would go, but there's nothing there. Instead, there is yet another signature. The original 1,000 Cordoba note this was made from appears to have been from that denomination's second run, which was done with a cheaper printing process and no watermarks. When the overprint was added, the signature of a new official was dropped into the otherwise blank space. In February 1990, much to everyone's surprise, the Sandinista government allowed free elections to take place, which they lost. The incoming government issued a new currency in 1991 called the Cordoba Oro, or Gold Cordoba, at a rate of 5 million to 1. I visited Nicaragua in 1994, and look, here's a 10 Cordoba Oro note from that trip. Pretty cool, huh? From failing communist regimes, we next move to a staunchly anti-communist regime. Zaire, now known as the Democratic Republic of Congo, issued this 1 million Zaire note in 1992. I'm not a big fan of currencies which are named after the country which issues them. It's too confusing. I'm looking at you, Afghanistan. Of all the banknotes I collected to put this video together, I think this is the one that looks the most exciting, like maybe it's actually worth some serious money. The color, I'm not quite sure how to describe it, a purpley scarlet, it just jumps out at you. The denomination number looks big and grand, and look, here's a jaguar. This portrait here is also pretty impressive looking, although a bit misleading. This is Mobutu Sese Seko, who seized power in a 1965 coup and brutally oppressed his people until he was deposed in 1997. Many people consider him to have been one of the worst African rulers of all time. Mobutu committed almost endless human rights violations and stole so much money from his country that the term kleptocracy was basically invented to describe him. He was a genuinely awful person who made the lives of millions of people miserable. Mobutu was also extremely vain. In addition to having his own portrait on the national currency, while he was still in office, this portrait is a bit flattering. What we see here is a vigorous military man in his early 30s, but by 1992, Mobutu was actually 62 years old, in frail health, and making regular visits to Europe for medical treatment. The reverse side is, in my opinion, a bit disappointing. This is the Matadi Suspension Bridge, which was built for Mobutu by the Japanese government in 1983. It's pretty cool as far as bridges go, I guess, but makes a pretty boring banknote design. But I do really like this Art Deco monogram for the Bank de Zaire. That's pretty sweet. And there's a watermark of Mobutu. With inflation running amok, Mobutu replaced the Zairean Zaire in 1993 with the Zairean New Zaire. In 1997, Mobutu was toppled and Zaire reverted to its original name, Congo. And a year later, the New Zaire was replaced by the Congolese franc, which is still in use today. Next, let's have a look at the smallest 1 million denominated banknote I have, at least in terms of physical size. This is the 1 million kupani note from Georgia. After the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, Georgia briefly used the old Soviet ruble as its main currency, but in 1993, the ruble was replaced with a temporary new currency called the kupani, which, as you might suspect, means coupon. And it didn't do terribly well. To be fair, the kupani faced a really uphill struggle. The strength of any currency is partially based, sometimes wholly based, on the confidence people have in the government issuing it. And for brand new countries just coming off 70 years of foreign domination, that is a tough ask. The post-Soviet Georgian economy struggled, as did every post-Soviet economy, and the fact that the kupani was a temporary currency with a very temporary sounding name probably didn't help build confidence. Anyway, the value of the kupani devalued rapidly after it first appeared. Within a year, the government was producing this 1 million kupani banknote. This is a pretty plain banknote in most respects, but it does have some interesting features. This symbol in the middle is called the borjgali, which is an ancient Georgian symbol representing the sun, or maybe time, depending on who you ask. Besides appearing on money, the borjgali appears on the uniforms of Georgia's national rugby team and has appeared on some Georgian flags in the past. These animals on either side of the borjgali are griffins, which are surprisingly detailed considering how simple most of this banknote design is. At the top, in the fantastic Georgian alphabet, it says Kupani National Bank of Georgia, and at the bottom, underneath the number 1 million, it says 1 million. Unsurprisingly, I guess. The reverse side is, well, pretty odd looking in my opinion. It is dominated by a large number 1 million and has what looks like grapevines carved in stone on either side. This note looks like it should have a watermark, but all you can see if you hold it up to the light is a pattern of geometric shapes. In October 1995, the people of Georgia said goodbye to the kupani and hello to the Larry.
Well, hello, Larry. Hello, Larry. You talk to people all day.
No, the Larry, their new currency. The replacement rate from the kupani to the Larry was 1 million to 1, so this note was effectively worth 1 Larry. The Larry has been a huge success, the hyperinflation of the mid-90s has not reappeared, and today 1 Larry is worth about 29 US cents. Speaking of 1995, that's the year that Turkey issued this 1 million lira banknote. Most of the 1 million denominated banknotes I'm showing you were issued following some sort of economic or political crisis, which sparked hyperinflation. Turkey, instead, just suffered really bad inflation for decades, but not so bad that it could technically be considered hyperinflation, say 30% a year or so. In my experience, one of the very best ways to insult anyone in Turkey is to say something unflattering about the country's modern founder, Kemal Atatürk. So let me critique this portrait of him very carefully. This is taken from a fairly famous picture of Atatürk, but I'm not sure this version of that photo does him any favors. In the original, Atatürk has an intriguing look on his face, like he has just said something extremely clever and is waiting to see your reaction. There is a twinkle in his eye and the hint of a smile. On this 1 million lira banknote, it looks more like he's trying to stare into your soul, or maybe hypnotize you. Anyway, there are much more suitable portraits of Atatürk on other Turkish banknotes. The reverse of this note has a dam. I'm not really a big fan of infrastructure projects on banknotes, but hey, I guess it's not the worst thing in the world. This is the Atatürk Dam in south-central Turkey. Okay. Atatürk's portrait is also used as a watermark, and there is this logo of the Turkish Republic Central Bank, half printed on each side so that it lines up when you hold it up to the light, assuming your note is genuine. There is one confusing feature. Although issued in 1995, there is an inscription which says, issued according to the law number 1211 of January 14th, 1970. And this has led some collectors to assume that the note itself is from 1970. It's not. At the time this note was printed, the exchange rate was roughly 50,000 lira to the dollar, so this 1 million lira note was worth roughly $20 or so. Inflation in Turkey got even worse than usual in the late 90s, however, and within 5 years, the value of this 1 million lira note had slipped from $20 to less than $1. 5 million, 10 million and 20 million lira banknotes were issued before eventually the lira was replaced with the new lira in 2003 at a rate of 1 million to 1. Inflation continues to be problematic in Turkey, but so far the highest denomination banknote of the new lira is only 200. Okay, we began this video with the most famous case of hyperinflation in the 20th century, and we're going to end it with the most famous case of hyperinflation in the 21st century, although Venezuela is currently making a bid for this title. But anyway, this is a $1 million bill from Zimbabwe, which, when it was issued in November 2008, was almost immediately worthless. Inflation was so bad in late 2008 that less than 3 months after printing its first $1 million notes, the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe was printing its famous $100 trillion banknote, which has been a staple of YouTube content ever since. But in this video, we are focusing on the humble $1 million bill. All of Zimbabwe's banknotes from this period are largely identical on the obverse, other than the color scheme and the denomination numbers. By the way, these are the Chiremba balancing rocks, a naturally occurring geological feature. The reverse sides of these notes always feature two different Zimbabwean scenes, and here on the 1 million banknote we see a tower from the ruins of Great Zimbabwe, the ancient stone city which gave the country of Zimbabwe its name, and also a picture of some cows. What I find most interesting about this particular note is that the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe was obviously already struggling to keep up with printing new denominations by the time they got to the 1 million. We can be confident of this because, in 3 different places, the watermark and 2 other security features, the number 1,000 can clearly be seen. Yes, the Zimbabwean authorities reused paper from their $1,000 banknotes to make the $10,000 and $1 million notes. Production standards continued to slide during this hyperinflationary run. From the $10 million banknote onwards, there wasn't even a watermark. In February 2009, the Zimbabwe dollar was replaced by a new dollar, actually the 4th Zimbabwean dollar in its history, at a rate of 1 trillion to 1. The 4th dollar is still in use, and although hyperinflation of the sort seen in late 2008 hasn't returned, inflation is still really bad. The current annual rate in Zimbabwe is sitting at around 240%. And so, that's how I became a millionaire 9 times over, by collecting banknotes. Thanks for watching. Which one of these banknotes was your favorite? And were there any that you were surprised to learn about? Please let me know in the comments. And please be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that bell so you won't miss the next Strange Money installment. And I'll see you in the next video.